Hey everybody, welcome to SoundBalming. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
LaMarr, Darnell Shields.
The holidays can be a powerful reminder of how much you are missing your loved ones, especially if this is the first year you have spent without them. Seeing other people continuing to enjoy the holidays with their loved ones can also be a powerful reminder that you are missing your loved ones. The pain of grief tends to surface with great intensity during milestone events like the holidays or like birthdays or anniversaries. But the Christmas holiday and the Hanukkah holiday and those winter holidays are typical events that are associated with our grief journeys. The intensity of grief is usually highest for many during the first year that these milestones events are experienced. However, people will experience pain of varying intensity during these milestone events beyond the first year. There is no timetable to resolve grief, and in many cases, journeys are lifelong. Experiencing pain at any time during the process is to be expected. Under normal circumstances, preparing for any holiday can be stressful as well as tiring. When a loved one dies, completing these holiday tasks become complicated by the intense pain of grief and the physical, emotional, and cognitive changes that accompany it. Our grief may be so painful that we question whether to celebrate the holidays at all. If you have any of these symptoms I mentioned, I have a prescription for you today. This prescription requires no copay. I have in the studio my lifelong friend who's going to provide you with the prescription for the holiday blues. Who is she? Well, I'm glad you asked. She's internationally known, recognized author, speaker, and global female empowerment expert with a master's of social work from the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Policy and Practice. She is the founder and CWW Chief Woman Warrior of Ferbee Enterprises International, LLC, a global female empowerment social enterprise. With over 40 years of experience, my friend Janice Ferebee has the distinction of being recognized by the great Oprah Winfrey. Yes, I said the big O. Essence Magazine for award-winning Got It Going On empowerment brand for girls of color. And she was the first models editor for the African Descent for 17 magazine. Blessed with 25 years of lifelong recovery from drug and alcohol abuse. Janice's authenticity, uncanny ability to connect with a wide range of audiences has made her an engaging, sought-after, go-to expert, MC, speaker, cancer addiction and recovery survivor, a legacy of the Ferebee family, including her great aunt, Dr. Dorothy Boulding Ferebee, DC physician, civil rights activist, and international humanitarian. Man, this girl got it going on, but she is in the studio with me. She is Miss AKA. She's the Maryland McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site Advisor. Man, she is everything, and I have not seen her for years. But I've been following her on social media. But she is joining me in the studio. Welcome, SoundBalming, my friend, Sister Janice Ferebee. What's up, Janice?
Hey, it's so good to see you. Well, and to really be a part of this just amazing podcast.
Man,
happy
holidays to you. You and I, David Miller, my whole crew.
Yeah.
We have so much history. Janice, I created this show because a lot of folks are doing some cool podcasts, and they're bringing on celebrities, people that they don't have relationships with. They're bringing on people that they might have read books about. They're bringing on people that they heard other folks. But when my producer approached me and said, "Hey, Shields, man, I want you to create this podcast called SoundBalming," and balm is a healing. And he says, "But what I want you to do is I want you to just open up your phone book. Old school say open up your Rolodex." He said, "Man, I want you to open up your phone book." He said, "Because I know you know everybody. And these are people I don't pretend like I know. These are people I have relationships." So I'm so glad that you're joining me in the Balm studio. And thank you for all the things that you've done over the years with girls, black and brown girls traveling all over. Let me tell you, this sister is amazing. Not only does she come from a history of famous people, I am blown away that I get a chance to hang out with her and read her things, read her stories. But man, Janice, we're going to talk about all the great things that you're doing. But you sent our producer this article that you wrote called "Navigating the Holidays When Loved Ones Are Gone." And now, originally we were going to talk about some other stuff, but when they sent me that article, and I'm like, it's Hanukkah right now. We got Christmas coming up. Right. We have Kwanzaa coming up, and folks are really, really dealing with grief and pain. What was the inspiration for you to write that article?
Well, this is the first Christmas without my dad. He passed away this past summer at the age of 96, so he lived a good long life. But I realized that I only have one stop to make to visit my family, my mother, father, and my two sisters, and that's the cemetery, because all of them are there. And this is going to be a very challenging, difficult holiday, but I do have some place to go. But it's hard for a lot of folks, especially this one being the first without my dad.
So let's talk about how are you dealing with what they call the holiday blues. I know that's like oxymoron. And then what could some other people that are out there, what are some things that you can provide, some strategies you can provide for them for dealing with some of the same thing? But I want to talk about what you're doing, because again, you're empowering all these other people. We look at all these individuals. I know you have a relationship with Susan Taylor, former editor of Essence Magazine, Oprah Winfrey. They've all dealt with grief. And a lot of times we look at you all as superheroes and sheroes, but you also sometimes put down your cape and your sword, and you are human. So how are you dealing with the holiday blues, and what strategies can you provide for our listeners out there?
Well, thanks for asking, because that's so important, to be able to relate to people. So one of the things that I've done is to tell someone. I have a really core group of friends that I share my ups and downs, and I've told them about what's going on with me. And I think that's so important. Let someone know, because that could be your lifeline. I also have carved out some time for grieving. When I watch some of these commercials, when I watch some of the shows, when I get cards now, when people ask about, how you're doing, I've carved out and allowed myself, I've given myself permission to grieve. I'm going to be going up to the cemetery to see my parents and my sisters on Christmas Day. I have a blanket, a wreath blanket that I'm going to leave there, and also just sit and talk to them, because that's what I do. And that's kind of what I would recommend to folks, to find new traditions, new ways of coping, but allowing yourself grief, allowing yourself to grieve, allowing yourself those crocodiles or the real ugly cry, like Oprah says. And then one of the other things that I do is volunteer. Whenever I can get out of myself, it really, really, it sounds like a cliche, but it really helps.
So you're creating new rituals for yourself. You're also providing some of these things for other people, for them to actually pour into as well. Because there's this whole conversation about Black women and women of color who are so strong. I mean, we look at the great Harriet Tubman, her movie is out right now. We, of course, look at the history of your family members, because the Ferbee name is very, very strong. What message do you have for Black women who feel like that they have to keep it all together?
Well, like you just said, taking off the cape, it's okay. And if you have to do it in private, because some of us just don't know how to do it in public, then do it in private, because you really have to. And I would say, again, taking some time to yourself, journaling, I do a lot of that. That's how I get a lot of my articles and books. But taking time to step back. But I also think that for Black women, Black and brown women who are so strong, you've got to have a support system. I have a kitchen cabinet that I call, those are the folks that are right in my front row, the front row of my life that I can tell anything to. And you must have that, even if it's just one person. But for strong women, you have got to be able to shed the superwoman cape and be able to just chill and get real. And it's really important because we are dying from heart disease, from, manifestations of cancer. We have got to take time to take a breath.
And so how do you put together the list of women? Like I do this thing about who's on your team. I think about the people that are on my team, the cheerleaders, the coaches, the referees. Walk us through that process, because as we're talking about going into 2020, every year, people create these resolutions, which drive me crazy. Because resolutions, you don't have to start on January 1st. Your butt can start like right now. Walk us through that process of putting together a team around you. How do you choose them? How do you maybe sometime eliminate them? How do you balance out those individuals? Walk us through that process.
I start with the ancestors. So individuals like the women from Dahomey, West Africa, 17th century, the women that the women warriors of Wakanda are based upon. I start with folks like Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Shirley Chisholm, my great aunt, Mary McLeod Bethune, my mom. So I have a halo of ancestors. And then I pick women who I know do not judge me, because I have this phrase, people who judge don't matter, people who matter don't judge. So I have individuals that are around me who have been around me for a while, who I've seen walk me through issues, and when I've gone through some tough times, they're still around. So those are folks that kind of get the front row of my life, and I've been through things with them as well.
So do you suggest that these individuals maybe write them down? Do you think that they should actually physically call these individuals and tell them that they're putting them apart, that they're creating, that they want them to be a part of the circle? Or do you think it's just something that the individual keeps close to their heart?
You can do a little bit of both, because if they're close enough to you, I've just told the folks that are in my kitchen cabinet that you're part of my kitchen cabinet, and you're on my angel team. And when we need to get together, I'm going to call on you. So I think it is a good idea to let people know, because sometimes folks are flattered, but you kind of already know who those folks are, and the women know who they are as well. You can have a few good men as well, but I have generally the women in my kitchen cabinet. So sharing that with them is a good idea, because every now and then you'll need to let them know, I'm calling on the kitchen cabinet right now, and that's who's on the phone. That's who's going to be at the spa. That's who I need right now. Because things are getting really heavy.
I love that you talked about our ancestors, those individuals that we have an indirect relationship with, who's a part of our DNA. And you mentioned those individuals. And I love the fact that you talked about, those individuals that don't judge you. I mean, this is a time where folks are really, really dealing with a lot of grief. In our family, we really focus on Kwanzaa. We don't really get too deep into the whole Christmas holiday. It's just a decision that we made, but we do honor our ancestors. At our table, we do celebrate with other individuals. My mom, she's old school. She's like, that old school mom. Like, I don't care what y'all don't celebrate, but these are my grandbabies. We're gonna do X, Y, and Z. So we give her that opportunity. But you can't disrespect Nana, right? But we give her, she understands it. She really, really understands that, and we honor what she sort of brings to the table. Are there any other rituals you think on the day of these holidays? Let's say Hanukkah, for those who celebrate Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or Christmas. Is there anything that they should do? Maybe if there's a holiday brunch or a holiday affair that they have for the family in honor of those individuals who have passed on, to really make those individuals come into that space, so there's not a whole lot of grief there?
Well, I would say first, turn off all your technology so that there can be quiet space, and bring in, as we do libations, invoking the spirit of our ancestors. Whether you choose to light a candle, whether you choose to share stories about, if there's someone in the room that knows that ancestor, tell a story about that relationship, about that person. That brings them to life. Also, visiting, if you can, visiting where the ancestors are laid to rest, either on that day or, several days, doing something like that. Those types of things are very helpful. But just to invoke the presence of that ancestor, having the children tell stories of what they think it might have been like to be at the foot of, so-and-so, because they've heard of, or what they think that they would like about, what they like about a picture that they see of an ancestor. And bring the little ones in. It is so important, whether they met them or not. It's so important to bring them into the fold, to have them talk about knowing about the ancestors and to hear these stories. Because that's how our history has been, given generation after generation, the griots, and that's what I consider myself at the Museum of African American History and Culture, sharing those stories and invoking the presence of our ancestors.
And you should know about sharing stories and receiving stories, Janice. Little Janice sat at the table around some great women who probably poured in you directly and indirectly. Is it because of these women? And talk about some of the women that are in your lives. Is it because of some of these women that started you on this journey? Because, of course, our listeners, they listen to that long bio, and I want you to go to her site, and we'll talk about that later where you can read more. What started you on this journey? Was it the strong women that was in your life, or was it a certain situation that was like the aha moment where you said, I really want to empower and work with girls?
I'm going to have to say it began with my mom, Elizabeth Ferbee, who was an AKA, and she was the treasurer she was treasurer of the chapter, and I just watched her. Theta Iota Omega, and that's where I was made in 1978. But she was a treasurer, and she was just so stoic. And she talked about my great aunt, Dr. Dorothy Bolding Ferebee, who I had never met, but I did get a chance to speak with and talk to about her history, and just hearing about my great aunt, learning about her amazing story, and then watching my mother, knowing that I wanted to be a woman warrior like my mother, because she worked with special education students, and she became an administrator at a special education vocational school. And I just thought that she was the baddest thing. She was a little controlling, but she still made a very big impression on my life. And I wanted to do things like she did and make a difference, because that's what she instilled in me. But that's what I saw, that quiet confidence and quiet power, and that's why I call myself Chief Woman Warrior today.
It's interesting because I was going to ask you about that title. I mean, because you're an author, consultant, docent, an international speaker, elected official, and founder of Chief Woman Warrior Ferbee Enterprises. You work at the National Museum of African Culture in D.C. as a docent, but the title that stood out was a Chief Woman Warrior, and you articulated that in a great way. If you all don't know Janice Ferebee, she has this quiet fight. You're so small and so little, but you got this light that's like around you, and it glows wherever you are. So to hear some of the things that have happened to you in your personal life, overcoming, the addiction and dealing with cancer and all of those things, what are some things that you used in your life to sort of pull you back from all of that?
I'll start with, being in almost 30 years in recovery from drug and alcohol, long-term recovery from drug and alcohol abuse, and that journey back to self-esteem, back to self-love, back to value and worth, has helped me in everything else that has happened in my life. I am a stage 2B fallopian tube cancer survivor, and it was because of the foundation that I had as a result of going through recovery and going through just the hard-hitting issues dealing with recovery. When both of my sisters died, well, I should go back even when my mother passed on New Year's Day in 2003, then my older sister passed of lung cancer in 2005, then 2 years ago, my little baby sister died of lung cancer in 2017. Reaching back into all of the things that I learned, how to just deal with life on life's terms, because that's what this is. Things happen, life happens, but having some tools, and that's what I talk about when I deal with girls and young women, having tools, and it's so important at this time of year as well. Bottom line, having those tools so you can reach into that toolbox, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Hanukkah, whether it's Kwanzaa, whether it's the summer, because anything can be brought up that will bring back memories and you're just, having to deal with a whole lot of stuff because there's so much stuff on television, on social media. We have to counteract crazy. So that's what I do. I have tools that I can use to kind of counteract what's going on outside of me.
So somebody out there is listening. They hear your bio. They hear the lineage of women in your space. Folks like Mary McLeod Bethune, folks like Dorothy Height, your mom, the AKAs. You're old school AK. You said 78. You old school AK, and y'all were really pledging. And you hear Janice Ferebee say, "I struggle with self-esteem issues." Explain how could that happen to someone like you who comes from a space that's filled with so much love and support?
I have to say, because we're only human. I'm only human, and no one is invincible, and there are cracks in every human being. And those cracks were in my life, even though I was able to dress it up. I looked good, I spoke well, I was a straight A student. There was that crack in my facade and that self-esteem. And it kind of followed me into adulthood, and it ended up manifesting itself in my drug and alcohol use, because that's the way it represented itself. Again, we are all human, and the cracks and crevices, things get in there. And if you don't have anything to counteract, even though I did have a loving family, sometimes there are things that just don't click. And it took me getting into trouble. It took me using drugs and alcohol. But it also took the God of my understanding, and that's who I choose to, to pray to. But whatever, the Creator, whoever, you choose to, something outside of you, something outside of me. I had to look to that. So, we're only human, and that's what I would have to say to everyone. And to be able to, you asked early on, who do you share with? You've got to have at least one person in your life that can be a lifeline, someone that you trust to be able to share those things with, who does not judge you. Because especially people who are in the public eye, people always have something to say. But if you have someone that can kind of keep you on the straight and narrow, or at least bring you back to center, that's what you need. And that's what helped me.
So I have two daughters, and I got a little cheat sheet because I'm gonna talk about my own daughters. I'm about to do a Donald Trump move. Like, could you help me with my own daughters? I know you wrote the What's Going On award-winning Got It Going. I know you wrote the Got It Going On empowerment brand for girls of color. And you and I traveled, discussed that. I've watched you roll that out on many, many stages. And at the time, my girls were little. You should see my girls now, right. 19 and 15. What are some signs? I want you to talk about the Got It Going On curriculum. But what are some signs that a guy who's raising two girls, and other individuals that are raising girls, what are some things that we should be mindful of? Because my girls are surrounded with a whole bunch of love like you, but you have something called Facebook depression that exists. That's a real thing. You have this, I'm judging myself through other eyes. And even though we're giving them all the tangibles, the spirituals, the concepts, the tools, life still shows up. What should I be looking for if I see them sort of going into a different direction?
So thanks for asking about Got It Going On, because the Image Awareness Guide for Young Ladies for girls 8 to 11 and Got It Going On 2 Power Tools for girls 12 to 17, and the 20th anniversary edition is coming out next year.
Yeah.
We have got to counteract, and that's why I say again, counteract the crazy. Negative images, messages, and influences, regardless of how much they are loved. Once they leave you, they are bombarded with all of that madness. And what Got It Going On does is helps to create a blueprint, helps to infuse the tools for girls and young women so that they have this tool belt that they can choose from. So regardless of the music that they're watching, the shows that they're watching, regardless of the tweets, the Snapchat, the, Instagram images or Facebook, whatever it is, people that are, clapping back at them or having something to say about them, even though they might not even know them, they must have a sense of self. And sometimes parents just don't know how to give it to them. That's what Got It Going On does. Got It Going On is an extension of a parent. So a lot of times, same thing I'll tell you is the same thing you will tell your child. It's in my book. And we know, as growing up, sometimes it takes somebody outside of the family to share something that will click. So that's what I would say. Got It Going On has a unique way of being an extension of a positive and power of example for a family. So for girls, just knowing that they have a toolbox, a toolkit that's made up of what I talk about, standards of excellence. And there are angels. They Got It Going On guardian angels that talk to the girls. And each one of the angels has an issue so that they're real life, they're relevant, and when I roll out the 20th anniversary edition, you'll see that these girls are telling their stories. They relate to the girls, have sexuality issues, have, seen their parents being, their dad abusing, their mom. One of the guardian angels is deaf, so she uses sign language, but all of those things are really important. We have got to allow our girls and young women to have other supportive outlets, and that's what Got It Going On is. Building confidence and cultural pride so that these girls know that they have something they can fall back on, but tools that they can, again, I keep going back to that tools, a toolbox that they can reach for that just helps, gird them with the information that you've given them as a family, but also that surrounds them once they leave your home.
So what was the greatest lesson you learned from writing this book? And I know you have the anniversary. Congratulations. We're going to talk about doing something in conjunction with that. Greatest lesson from writing this book? That the girls are listening and watching you. That you must be, I have to, as someone who they're looking at, I've got to have my act together because they are watching and they are listening and they want to know and they want to learn how they can live better. They want to grow up great and they want somebody to help tell them and teach them that. I don't care how crazy and wild they are, and I'm sure, we've both been among, young women who've had some tough times, but they're watching and they want to know, what can I do to make my life better, to be somebody like you. They're watching and they want to know that, and that's one of the things that I learned writing this book, because girls told me, thank you. If it hadn't been for you, if it hadn't been for what you said, even though my mother told me 10 times, or my guardians, or the judge, but when I came to your program, you didn't judge me. You told me what I needed to do. You didn't let me, slip and slide, but you didn't judge me, and I'm grateful for that. And so I've watched girls grow into women who are now running their own businesses, commissioned officers. But that's the lesson that I learned. That's the greatest, that they're watching you and that they want better for themselves. So you're celebrating 20 years. What have you noticed about girls that have changed since you wrote the book 20 years ago? We know music has changed. We know culture has shifted. We know technology is all in this space. So what's changed since you first sat down to write these curriculum and workshops 20 years ago? I have to say that I am saddened and I'm frightened because, and I thought that my work would be irrelevant at this day and age, but it is more necessary now. What I've noticed is that because of social media and technology, and there is not enough out there that's counteracting the crazy, our girls are slipping further and further away into lack of self-esteem. They are more vulnerable to being trafficked, to all of the negative things that you see and hear, and they are more, their minds are swayed. And I'm going to bring up someone who has been named Entertainer of the Year, but we live in an age of Lizzos and Cardi B's. Yes.
And when you have an individual who bears their ass at a public event and is not arrested, because that's lewd behavior and indecent exposure, but is glorified and other teams want her to come, you have girls watching that. And then you also have her being touted as the entertainer of the year, not taking anything away from her talent, but let us be very clear, her behavior was indecent and unacceptable, but we accept the unacceptable, and that is what is different now. Our society has grown to accept the unacceptable, to make it okay for things like that, to just laugh it off, and our girls are looking at that and saying, well, there's nothing wrong with that, and there is something wrong with that.
So what then becomes the counter narrative to those artists? Because I love art. I'm an artist. My daughter's an artist, and I'm challenged with some of the things that she's writing in her lyrics. But I understand it becomes a part of the art. And it's a young lady who grew up in a very conscious, strong community. So what becomes the counter narrative for those listeners that may be out there who want to expose their girls, children to new and innovative things?
What's the counter narrative? Is things that we grew up learning and knowing, just decency and having a moral compass. It's not about not wanting our young people to express themselves, but there is a time and a place, and I think we've gotten too far away from that. There's still decency, there's still morality, and it doesn't have to be all straight-laced and buttoned up, but we need to share that and talk about what you can do. Diana Carroll talked about, anybody who needs to take their clothes off or do these ridiculous things, they must not really be that much of an entertainer. Those kinds of things. We need to think about, just because it's out there doesn't mean it's acceptable and should be sanctioned.
It's interesting you said that. There's been this great conversation around social media, maybe 3 years ago, around black male comedians. And it's this whole conversation about refusing to put on the dress. They talk about Tyler Perry. They talk about Martin Lawrence. They talk about Eddie Murphy. And they talked about how many of these black male comedians refuse to put on a dress. And it talks about the feminization of comedy, and that those individuals who decided to put on the dress, a physical dress, their numbers went out of the roof, off the charts, because they made a decision to do something totally different, but something that they may disagree with. And so when you talk about the counter narrative, there is this conversation of giving our young people options outside of some of these artists, because again, I remember speaking at an event, I'm not going to name the artist, and the artist went up before me, said all the N-word, put your hands up, and they all get up on stage and they do this. And then when I came out, same group of young people, I said, all my kings stand up. It was like crickets that was in the space. And so, I said, I love the artist. I love the artist's music, and I acknowledged him that he was in the space. But again, it has to be that counter narrative, because these images are bombarding our young people. And I'm so glad that you talked about that. And you said, no, I like how you talked about it, because some young person will be like, well, she doesn't like Lizzo, she doesn't like Cardi B. And you said, talent, they're great in their talent. But again, there needs to be a counter narrative to some of these things. And then to take it a step further, Janice, who's controlling the narrative? When you talk about who's controlling the narrative of women, in particular women of color, they don't look like us. They really, really don't. And so when you talk about what beauty is, beauty becomes whatever the norm is, and whoever's making that decision on magazines, in music, on social media. There was a great article that came out in Wired magazine. His brother's last name is Latham. I can't think of his first name, but he talks about controlling. He talks about segregation on the internet, and it was a real interesting concept, because he was saying is that people of color aren't able to control their narrative on the internet. So should we then separate? And I read this and I was like, wow. this is a very, very different perspective on how social media, how we can control our image in social media. He talked about, how a lot of the social media sites that were for people of color no longer exist. And so you do bring up a good point. Well, since we're going into 2020, when we're celebrating you're celebrating 20 years of the Got It Going On, what are some of your goals that you're going to be, or some of the things that you're working on in 2020 that may be different from the years past?
Well, more for me being out there in the public as an authority, as an expert on female empowerment from puberty to menopause. So empowering females through the lifespan, getting booked for paid consulting and speaking, and just, the different topics, Got It Going On, building confidence and cultural pride in young women, from Me Too to Know More, the sisterhood, talking about pledging and not to pledge, or the lure of leadership. Also about race is not a bad four-letter word, whole cultural competency. But all of those things dealing with women, girls, and how they can become their best selves in this world that we're living in today, with all of this social media, with all of the, what we're talking about, being able to counteract some of the negative images, messages, and influences, but being able to, bottom line, build confidence and cultural pride. So for this 20th anniversary is 20 years, what has happened over the 20 years. There was no social media 20 years ago when Got It Going On came out. So what I now have to deal with is how to, as you were talking about, how do you wrangle in girls who are going to be interested in Got It Going On, so keeping up with, technology, but also, as you also said, who is in charge of the narrative, and that I am looking to be in charge of this narrative for the girls that I work with, the girls that I want to reach, and to make it so that I'm relevant. I'm almost 70 years old. Well, I'll be 65 in 2020. But there's still a need for the work that we do, that I do, and to use all of that I've learned, take a look at what's going on, and to continue to be a visionary, even at this age, and to know that getting older, so these girls can see, now we are becoming the ancestors. I want them to look to us for wisdom, for humor, for skills, for leadership, because they see that this is the trajectory I want to go. This is where I want to go. So now that I am becoming an elder, I want Got It Going On to be seen as a way to bridge myself to that. So these girls look at me and those of us who are doing this work, I want to get to where they are.
And I can't believe that you, relevant. And you talking about Got It Going On. Let me tell you, Janice got it going on at 65. When you said 65, I had to fall back in my seat. I'm like, what? So you talking about personally got it going. I think she wrote that title for herself because she is not aging. She definitely got it going on. But speaking of got it going on and people finding you, how could they find you on all of your social media contact information? How can they get in contact with you? JaniceFerebee.com, my website. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, same handle, Janice Ferebee. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, and the website. So they can find me all of those different ways. I'll be doing some workshops in 2020. I'll be doing some retreats, especially as I move into working with women over 50. Pink Cougar Club. Cougar Club. So that's the brand for the women over 50. So as I move into that realm, but yeah, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, website, JaniceFerebee.com. So Janice, before we wrap this up, this is my favorite part of the show. Is called the Super Bomb Questions. And every person I bring on here, I let them know that this is like a fire round, rapid fire. And just because now you said you're almost 65, don't think I'm going to slow it down for you, sister, because you have not slowed down. And we're so grateful that you're still, as the old folks said, part of the good fight. So here we go. The very first question is, what is your favorite word? Wisdom. What is your favorite quote or Bible verse?
Speak life to our children so they become what you tell them.
What is your superpower?
Being purposeful.
If you were in the Miss America talent competition, what would your talent be?
I would sing.
What's your spirit animal or your animal spirit?
Black Panther.
What's your morning routine? What's the very first thing you do when you get out of bed or wake up?
Get on my knees, read, exercise, breakfast, write.
What dead person would you most like to meet or get advice from?
My great aunt, Dr. Dorothy Boulding Ferbee.
And that's the way we're going to end our show, with your great aunt. I want to thank my friend Janice Ferebee for joining me in the Bomb Studio. I want to thank my super producer Tuweri Ganges and Supremacy for our theme music, and for all of you listening out there. And as always, believe that something wonderful is about to happen, and that some people miss the message because they're too busy looking for the mess. Thanks for tuning in, and do something for someone other than yourself today. You've been listening to SoundBalming. Peace.